direction. No one can pull me out. I've always felt different from the others. I'm running away now. Fears are fading, won't stop breathing. 'Cause I'm sick of standing up instead of going down. I'm sick of never being able to cross the line. I'm sick of pretending everything is fine. You got it, you're just a fucking freak like me.
And just like that, we're back at you with another edition of Ring Respect Radio. We are the Video Bros. I'm Bobby Munson, and that man beside me, he's getting this kind of introduction. He is Papa Smokes. Mr. Angelic Voice, how you doing today?
Oh yeah, Munson, I'm doing great. How are you doing, and how are all my wrestling people doing out there?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic, Papa Smokes, and that's because you have delivered on a great topic here for Ring Respect Radio to kick off 2023 in the right fashion. But before we get into today's conversation, we're going to ask you to go ahead and click subscribe like it says on the picture. Subscribe, you pencil neck geeks. Whether you're on our local establishment, the Video Bros Network, it doesn't matter. Give us a like, follow, subscribe, and all those kind of things. You guys have been kicking ass out there, and we love you for it. So keep up the great work. But, before we even get into the main topic of today, I just want to take a quick moment and just send love, prayers, and our thoughts out to the family of Jay Briscoe. What a loss, Papa Smokes. I didn't even want to start to think about doing an episode talking about Jay in full. I think down the line we'll have to do something, but for today, I just want to take a moment and just send the absolute best to him and his family. Wish his kids a speedy recovery because goddamn, man, like it's even hard to talk about. Just horrible, sad news in the wrestling world.
Yeah, I've also had a cloud over my head since I learned the news yesterday morning. I guess it happened the previous night, and what an awful accident. And my first thought was just, wrestlers driving all the time, hitting the road and everything. But I don't think he was traveling to do with wrestling, because he had his little girls with him, and that's even more tragic that they got injured. But the wrestling world, just to talk of it in terms of wrestling, just lost such a great performer and such a great guy. And we've heard some of the testimonials on Twitter and social media of the people that knew him and worked with Jay Briscoe, and just the all-around sadness. And I have to second my wishes of condolences and just the sadness that I feel for anybody that passes much too early.
Yeah, exactly. The horrible, tragic passing. Again, his daughters were in critical condition. I hope that they pull out of this as best as possible. That there's no way that anything good comes from any of this, but we just hope that, something happens that goes positively and they, recover in some way anyway, because you just don't want this to happen to anybody.
Yeah, the family needs time, and it's going to take a lot of time to heal from this. But I hope people respect their privacy and send along positive energy and positive vibrations, because they need help right now.
Yeah, and you know what? We do like to do episodes where we pay tribute to people whose careers that we've lost, and this one's kind of hit all of a sudden. Weren't prepared to start doing one here, and I think that we'll give it time. Give it time for the family to heal a little bit before we start doing our tributes to Jay here on the show. But who we are going to pay tribute to, though, Papa Smokes, is someone that the wrestling industry did lose a while back. But again, somebody that had a very long, very illustrious career. And this is why I'm excited about this episode. Yeah, you brought up researching into the career of Freddie Blassie. And of course, my knowledge of Freddie Blassie, I was aware he was a wrestler, but didn't see much or know much about the wrestling side of it and his career. More of the managerial side would be where my familiarity with Freddie Blassie came into play. But my eyes are wide open now. I've checked out what I could find for matches, and man, I like the work of Freddie Blassie. I mean, fantastic manager, one of the best in managerial skills, but damn, what a wrestler as well, too.
Yeah, and most of us that are still alive these days just remember Blassie from his WWE run or WWF run in the 80s as a manager of such talents as Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. He managed them to the tag team title. Hercules Hernandez, a few other people as well. And he was one of those guys that he was so tight with Vince McMahon Sr. and became tight with Vince McMahon Jr. that they kept him around. They wanted to keep him working as long as they could, and they were going to take care of Blassie because he made them a whole pile of money when he was a wrestler.
Yeah, he really did. But to better understand his link to the WWF or WWE as we now know it, let's talk a little bit about his life and what got him there in the first place. Because I went digging deep, and again, like you can find a lot of great articles online, a lot of things that people have written about Fred Blassie. There has been very few videos that you'll find on YouTube that go into depth. I believe that Dave from Dave Knows Wrestling and a guy that he teamed up with there that did a nice video that talked about the career of Fred Blassie. Of course, Jim Cornette is well known for documenting a lot of the stories he knows about Fred Blassie as well too that people could check out, or you could go check out the articles online. But let's start. So from youth, or before he was it before he was born or when he was born that his parents immigrated? They were German immigrants that came to the U.S. Fleeing around the time of World War I, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and coming to I'm not sure at first, but I think came right to the California area because Blassie was always a big Los Angeles, California man.
Yeah, and again, came out to the U.S. during that time. From there, but Fred Blassie would start to get into enjoying seeing pro wrestling, but that's not what his parents wanted for him. So they wanted kind of leaning towards that meat cutting career, if I'm not mistaken. He worked at a butcher shop. They were looking at a meat cutting career being the path for young Fred Blassie, but he was an avid. He wanted to get into pro wrestling. Used to sneak into local pro wrestling matches as a young man in order to catch the fights.
Well, sometimes you got to do what you got to do too, and if money is scarce and you've got the passion for something, you got to make it happen one way or the other. And this would lead to a lifelong obsession with wrestling with Fred Blassie, especially in the Los Angeles area, where we'll talk about at some point here at the heights of his career, his tie with the Olympic Auditorium, which we've talked about previously. This is what got me thinking about this topic, Fred Blassie, is that a month or so ago when we talked about the death of Gene LaBelle and his tie with the Olympic Auditorium, I was watching some more stuff and reading a bit more stuff after that, and thought we should talk about Blassie because he's right in on that too. And my head was just in the zone of the Olympic Auditorium.
Yeah, and again, that it couldn't be a better time because it was a fantastic time to be able to learn about this man's career. Let's talk a little bit about where he went before he really kind of came. I mean, he started a little bit into pro wrestling. I think that he started going to some of the gyms and stuff where the boys were. He also would go down to the local matches, and some of the guys started showing him some of the locking holds and stuff like that, some of the submissions and stuff like that they were teaching young Fred Blassie at the time.
Yeah, and Blassie was already blessed with a good, sturdy body, and he was working out and exercising a whole bunch. So again, a lot of us only know him as the older man, but he was quite a striking man when he was younger. He had the good body, the big chest, the big shoulders, and all that stuff. And he was a handsome dude too. So this led perfectly into wrestling, and later on for him into a small career in show business as well.
Yeah, and quite the career. But even before that, he would actually enlist in the U.S. Navy back around the time of World War II. So again, Fred Blassie, a big thank you for the service that he provided there too. Choosing to go over during a time of war to defend his country, get involved there before returning back and really having essentially his first gimmick in professional wrestling, which was to be called Sailor Fred Blassie.
Yeah, and that was. You can imagine him when he's young, fresh-faced with the nice physique, the tan, the combed hair, and the nice haircut and everything. Perfect babyface character, Sailor Freddie Blassie, especially with the tie to the U.S. military. When back in the time when all soldiers were thought of a lot more as heroes in society.
Yeah, but it wasn't really until his heel turn that things really kicked off for him, though, too. That would be around the time of him dyeing his hair, bleach blonde, like you mentioned, being the kind of the more Hollywood, the California type. The one that, I mean, that was a gimmick that really stuck back in the day. This is something, like that Buddy Rogers. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of guy that Ric Flair was. These are the kind of guys. They have that arrogance about them, like they're better than you, pretty boy type style, and that's what drove people insane back in the day.
For sure, and Gorgeous George being the good example of the first guy that had the female scantily clad valet lead him out in the bedazzled robe and the perfume atomizer spraying the little perfume and the blonde hair and everything. Of course, it's been done 1,000 million times since then, but back then that was a little more fresh of a gimmick. And like, we talk about wrestling getting junky now or fake kind of the back then, that was probably thought of by a lot of wrestlers as a cop out and a sellout and a gimmick. And a lot of those guys didn't like that kind of stuff. The Ultimate Wrestlers were thought of as like the Lou Thez, Jack Briscoe style, just shoot grapplers, just trunks, no gimmick, no nothing, and just wrestling skill. But the business was changing and starting to make more money with some more elaborate gimmicks.
Yeah, and it started to pay off. Again, I believe it was at a local carnival that the term Pencil Neck Geek ended up getting used by Freddie Blassie for the very first time. I believe that the gimmick of the other individual was something along the lines of he was an accountant or something like that. You can elaborate a little bit more, Papa Smokes, but he was a pencil pusher, really, a paper pusher of sorts.
Yeah, and as we all know, in the old days of the circuses, the geek used to be they would have kind of a mentally deranged individual who would do all kinds of weird stunts, and one of the stunts would be to bite the head off the live chicken, and that was the geek, and it just thrilled and disgusted audiences for a long time. But you couldn't get a normal guy to do that. You had to get someone that was, not quite all there mentally. So it was a huge insult. And then adding the pencil neck and putting someone's physical size into the insult is just makes it all that tastier.
Yeah, and Fred Blassie would have inevitably get dubbed a bit of a nickname around this time too. He started to get dubbed the nickname of the Vampire for the fact that he would often bite opponents during his matchups and would be seen in interviews or backstage segments. He'd be filing his teeth, if I'm not mistaken, down, so it make it look like he's getting them all sharpened up, ready for his next biting victim. Yeah,
he had a big money dentist that did all kinds of cosmetic dental surgeries and stuff, and he got the guy to put caps on his 2 canine teeth so that he could file them into fangs. And that's some great heel work there, just biting into the opponent's forehead with real sharpened teeth and causing all the blood. So this is another thing, is just how weird that was of Blassie's gimmick, that he had that kind of Hollywood I'm better than you kind of gimmick going on. But he was also one of the pioneers of kind of like, I don't want to say deathmatch wrestling, but the bloodier, gorier side of wrestling. And we'll get to some of his Japanese work later, but he had people pretty much dropping dead in their seats from some of the mayhem and violence he was causing in his matches.
And he got under people's skin so much that they wanted to incite the violence back at him. Blassie would often require police escorts at most of the arenas that he would show up at out of fear for what the fans would do to him.
Yeah, it ain't like it used to be. Heels nowadays kind of, it seems like a lot of them craves the love of the fans still, but Blassie's from the time where you had to drive them crazy. You had to make them hate you so badly. You had to make them hate you as badly as you could get them to hate you and fear you. So that's the way he went about it. And, various other wrestlers fit that bill as well, such as the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher, and a number of other guys took that route of just being feared and hated. And Blassie had that all together too, especially once they called him the Vampire, and the the rumors of his blood drinking started and everything, which were completely unfounded. But when you get the nickname the Vampire. People are going to kind of run with that.
Yeah, and all this kind of took place in the time that he was working for Paul Jones. He would then also, like, he originally had worked for Jules Strongbow, and then came back in 1960 to begin working once again with Jules Strongbow.
Yeah, because aside from Los Angeles, I think, and New York, I suppose, the WWF in New York, the other biggest place where Blassie got extremely over and extremely popular was Georgia, working for Jay Strongbow. So he had a lot of success, both as a babyface and a heel down there. Held a couple of the straps and all that stuff. But again, this is even before the magazines were really covering wrestling and stuff. So there isn't that much video or even that many pictures from back then. As you notice, trying to research into this, there's not nearly enough stuff on Blassie as there should be.
Yeah, you'd think you'd have an entire encyclopedia's worth, but it is a much deeper dive than one would think. And that's why I'm glad we're getting to elaborate on some of this and talk about it, and hopefully open the conversation for more people to research it. But let's is there a little bit more we want to talk about on the side of 1960s era Jules Strongbow promotion, working there with the WWA, or did we want to move on to 64 when he finally went over to see Vince Sr. in the WWF?
Yeah, let's go there, I say, and that was a very fruitful time for him too.
Well, I mean, that's essentially where he would start feuding with guys like Bruno Sammartino, of course, one of the best known names that Vince Sr. had working for him. And then, of course, Bobo Brazil, again, another person that, we've talked very highly upon. I know that you're a big fan of as well, too, Papa Smokes.
Yeah.
So some great feuds that Fred Blassie had there working with Vince McMahon Sr.
Yeah, and also the Golden Greek John Tolos, too, who was a huge star out in California and all that, but had some great years working up in New York where they were paying lots of money and the business was doing good. And Blassie had his share of Madison Square Garden main events and other large buildings in the Northeast there. And just all those, once he got big in LA, all those territories that he went to, he was always a main event guy. He never had to do any preliminary stuff, never any of that stuff, because he was the complete picture, the complete package as a worker. He could not only do the in-ring stuff pretty good, his style, very simple as you noticed, but completely interactive with the crowd at all times, working them, giving them, what they want and what they don't want all the time in a way to drive them up into a fury of hatred towards him. He was a master at it.
He sure was. So you mentioned a little bit earlier, because you're going to start getting close to the managerial times here soon. But again, you mentioned about him going over to Japan, and he had a very notable feud going on there over in Japan as well, too. In fact, he had quite the time there. Elaborate a little bit more for us on that. And we will take a quick pause here. Uh-oh. Not sure if that's him or that's me. Bob Smokes, you there? There we go. I think I lost you for a minute.
We're back.
We're back. That happens, technical difficulties, but we'll continue on. We were mentioning earlier, you mentioned about Fred Blassie's time over in Japan as well, too, and a notable feud that he had over there. I want you to elaborate for everybody a little bit more about his time over in Japan.
For sure. That's probably Blassie's most famous ring work, his biggest feud, his most money-drawing feud, and most people watched was against Japanese star. We've talked about him on here before, Ricky Dozan, who was, like the Hulk Hogan or the John Cena or the Steve Austin of Japan during the 60s and 70s, or mostly the 60s, I guess. Hugely popular star, completely over in, like we talked about Antonio Inoki. Ricky Dozan was the guy before him that was completely recognizable by everyone that lives in the entire country, whether they're a wrestling fan or not. You know who Ricky Dozan is, and he was thought of as a warrior. and he was the way they ran their promotion was they like to have the Western or American or British wrestlers over, and they would have their big star Ricky Dozan face one of them, and it was like he was defending their country against the international invaders kind of thing. So when the Vampire Blassie came over with the filed teeth and the promo and talking crazy stuff and yelling, and the interest for this match started to get so huge that they realized we can't just have it live in an arena. We have to put it on TV. Of course, at that time, this is the pre-cable era. You put something on TV, it's on a main channel. That's the only thing to watch, probably. Or there might be 2 or 3 channels back then, but probably only one. So it was something like 60 or 80 million people that watched this match. It's one of the huge records in wrestling. No one could believe that this match was happening and on TV, and it remains one of the hugest matches in wrestling history by a long shot. Ricky Dozan has another big record as well. One of his matches against the Destroyer, Dick Beyer, the Destroyer, you know him, Munson, with the mask. They had a series, and one of those was on TV as well. Bloody and everything, Beyer bleeding from under the mask and everything, but putting it on TV, and yeah, they're not battling for 1 million or 2 million or 5 million viewers. They're getting 50, 60, 70 million. It's the whole country watching.
Yeah, and big draws too with the gates and stuff like that too that were coming in.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to the wrestling side of Blassie's career, I'm going to put this question over to you. What would you find was his best feuding partner? Who was the best feud for Freddie Blassie, whether it be North America, Japan, wherever? Which one did you enjoy the most?
It's a tough one because there are a bunch of good ones, and in that LA territory, he worked with a bunch of guys, including Bearcat Wright and Bobo Brazil and John Tolos and so many big stars of the day. Goliath and Gordman were the big tag team out there, and I know Blassie battled them in a number of tag teams, but just because of what we were just talking about, I'd have to say Ricky Dozan, just because of the gigantic magnitude of the climactic match. Was just not a building full of people, but an entire country watching that match. It's unprecedented, and I don't think you could have that ever again, but how special that is for wrestling history.
Yeah, you bet. Now, not a lot of people in the history of professional wrestling can transition from one role to another and make it work extremely well. It's a rare commodity, especially to make it to a point where you're very much known for both sides of it. And Fred Blassie managed to do this. And the fact that he turned to managerial times. So Fred Blassie would go on, I believe it was, I think, just going to check my notes, around 1974 that he retired from the ring, and that's when he decided to become a manager. Many big names that he managed. I got a list here. I want to kind of go through a little bit of this list and just talk about who you thought were some of the ones that really prospered the most under Fred Blassie, starting with, I've got Nikolai Volkov.
Yeah.
Then we got like a Blackjack Mulligan, High Chief Peter Maivia, Ray Stevens, Adrian Adonis, Jesse the Body Ventura, Dick Murdoch, the Iron Sheik, George the Animal Steel, Hulk Hogan, Mr. Fuji. There's probably more I'm missing here, Bob, so I probably haven't even scratched the surface. Yeah.
There's some of those I forgot as well. And just listen to that list. It's a who's who, including Hulk Hogan, right? You think Hulk Hogan wasn't young and learning from Blassie, including that promo style, which is part of Hogan's bread and butter too, is having a strong promo. And Blassie was the best. He was so comfortable in front of the camera and had been on movie sets and done all kinds of TV, both with wrestling and on TV shows and stuff. He could teach the young guys how to do that. And Blassie had such a strong bond with professional wrestling that he wanted to help the younger guys. He wasn't one of those gatekeeping kind of guys. He wanted to help the younger guys, but he had to find you worthy first.
Yeah, and he found a lot of great people that went on to a lot of great things within the industry. And you see a name like Mr. Fuji. There's another guy that transitioned from being a professional wrestler to what most people nowadays wouldn't realize. Like they were going to think like me at first, that was a manager. I had no idea of Mr. Fuji's wrestling career prior, much like Fred Blassie, like we're talking about now.
Yeah, Fuji was mostly a tag team guy with Professor Tanaka and with Mr. Saito sometimes too, and they were multi-time WWF champions with Blassie and with Lou Albano. So, Fuji had a long career, mostly known as a tag team guy.
Yeah, sure did. So yeah, that the managerial career went on for quite some time, but he remained with the WWE, WWF pretty much from all that time. When he went back to work for the WWF as a manager, he remained as part of the active roster employed by the WWF right up until his passing, if I'm not mistaken. Was inducted into their Hall of Fame, like he's in everybody's Hall of Fame. I'm sure of it. I don't follow closely enough. I'm sure he's in the Observer Hall of Fame and every possible Hall of Fame. I'm sure at one point in time he's got to be in some sort of Hollywood Hall of Fame too, because he expanded out past professional wrestling. He was one of the ones that really took it and went for it outside of there and really, trailblazed for a lot of the guys who would go into the entertainment side of things outside of professional wrestling.
For sure. And like Gene LaBelle, when we talked about him, he had grown up in the Los Angeles area that's focused on filmmaking and television and all that stuff. So just like LaBelle, Blassie was like a good wrestler and all that stuff, but he was more than that. He had the whole package. He had the whole personality and the presentation and the star power. That's why I say he was never a mid-card guy. He was always a top guy because everyone wanted to, brush up against him and get some of his skill and talent onto them kind of thing. And you wanted a match with this guy. And he was in a whole bunch of movies. He's in the show Happy Days. I remember that. That show.
Of course.
He's a tough wrestler in that movie. Same thing as, in that TV show. Same thing as Gene LaBelle. Often, if Hollywood needed a tough guy, a gang leader, a wrestler, a boxer, some sort of tough dude that fights in their movie, they might go and get a professional wrestler because then that guy can do his own stunts or do his own bumps, so to speak, and can be worked with easily for fight choreography and stuff too.
And I want to, if I'm not mistaken, he's also in the music video that Cyndi Lauper put out that pretty much features the entire cast of the WWF at the time.
Yeah, he's in that too. And one little tidbit I wanted to add about him transitioning from wrestler to manager is it wasn't completely a decision he made. Blassie had decided to go up and work for the McMahons in New York did you say it was 1974 or 5? And
74 is when he retired. It was actually 64 when he went to go work for Vince Sr.
Yeah, that was just it. He went up there he wanted to wrestle still, but in the state of New York at that time, when they were still regulated by sports commissions, it wasn't allowed. You couldn't get a wrestler's license after the age 55 or something like that, just for the insurance or health risks or whatever. So they didn't have that in other states, but New York had that. So Blassie foiled in his attempt to keep wrestling. He was more or less forced to transition into a managerial role.
It's funny to think that a guy at that age was forced into choosing not to wrestle again.
Yeah.
You're talking about a tough guy right there. If I was that age, I know I sure as hell wouldn't feel like getting in there and bumping around with tough guys myself.
For sure. But, we're not Freddie Blassie. He lived the whole life of that. And he had the passion for the business. And I don't think anybody screwed with Blassie. I mean, he was well-liked and a tough guy too. And there's talk about his private life too, which I don't really like to get into too much because it's none of our business. But he was a ladies' man. He always had women around. He was always married, but always had women on the road and stuff. Had 2 wives at one point, like had a Japanese wife and a U.S. wife because he was traveling all the time. He's a practical dude, right? You need your stuff with you, I suppose. And I also think he was typical of a pro wrestler. When we compared him to like a Ric Flair, is he lived wrestling. He was always on the road, so his kids barely know him, kind of thing. And I don't think the kids liked him that much. I think his one kid kind of didn't want anything to do with him, but the one kid was a fan of him as a wrestler kind of too. So like that was their bond, is that he only really liked him because he thought he was such a talented wrestler. But these are the prices that people pay, I suppose, when you want to be a professional wrestler, live your life on the road, traveling, living out of a suitcase, living in hotels and stuff. If you have a family at home, that's difficult, right? I mean, people do manage to have both, but sometimes it's a difficult situation.
Like they say, it doesn't matter the make or model of the vehicle. Eventually, they all need an oil change. It goes without saying. But anything else you wanted to touch on Fred Blassie's wrestling career, his managerial career, anything? Any last thoughts that you got here, Pop Smokes, for everybody?
No, not really. Just that that's one guy that I'm glad that Vince Jr., the Vince McMahon we know, recognized the value in. I think the two got along very well, so that helped. Vince Sr. would have told Jr., hey, Blassie's one of our guys. We take care of him till he dies, kind of thing. He's always got a job here till he dies. Same thing with Gorilla Monsoon and Blackjack Lanza and a bunch of other Gerald Briscoe at one point, but I guess he got fired from his job. He didn't get it right till the end, but there were a bunch of those guys that Vince Sr. said, hey, once I'm gone, you got to take care of these guys till they die. And Blassie was one of those. And I'm glad that the younger generation of viewers got to see him as the manager still, but still getting that sharp wit in his promos and the insults and the Hollywood fashion plate outfits and the rhinestone jackets and the slacks and the cane and everything. What a guy, what a character. And he transcended various generations up to the one when we were kids, when we saw him as a manager on TV.
You bet. And, I heard you mention Rhinestone there, Pop Smokes. And before we get to where people can find us, I'm going to tell you where you can find us. And that's on Saturday, February the 18th, live in Saskatoon. Papa Smokes and I are going to be down at ringside, the Video Bros, taping all the action. And I say Rhinestones because Rhinestone Cowboy is one of the very many people that's going to be joining us live in action that day. We're also going to have a cruiserweight match. It is going to be the Son of Irish taking on Tony Novak. And in our main event of the evening, it is going to be a tag team match. It's going to be the team of El Asesino and the champion, Sheik Akbar Shabazz. They're going to be taking on the team of the Kellys, Cannonball Kelly and Colton Kelly. And guess what? There is a stipulation PPW management put on this one. If Colton Kelly or Cannonball Kelly happen to if either one of those men get the pinfall on the champion, Sheik Akbar Shabazz, in that main event, they will then become the new number one contender to the Prairie Pro Wrestling Championship. You don't want to miss it. Get your tickets for Love is Dead, presented by Prairie Pro Wrestling. Saturday, February 18th, live in Saskatoon. Papa Smokes, I'm turning it over to you. Where can people reach out to you? Where can they find you coming up in the upcoming weeks?
I am on Elon Musk's free speech wonderland and theme park known as Twitter. I'm at smokes_papa. And on Twitch, you can find me at papa_smokes_.
That's fantastic. And as always, we got lots of things going on here in our local establishment. There is everywhere where you can reach out to us, follow, like, and subscribe. You're probably also watching here on the Video Bros Network. And if you are doing so, we appreciate the subscription as well, too. Everything you can do to help us out. And as always, you want to help us pay the bills, head on over to see our friends at Rogue Energy, where you can use the promo code OLEPODS for 10% off your order. But that is it for us. In the meantime and in between time, check out all the other work that Papa Smokes and I have here on our local establishment, or Saturdays at Prairie Pro Wrestling. We will see you guys very soon. Take care.